Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of Uncaged. We are at the halfway point of Season 1, Episode 5, and by my side, as always, is my boy, DC, Daniel Crimmins. Daniel, how you doing? We are at the halfway point of Season 1, Dan.
And what a season it has been, and you know what? Honestly, we have a big one today.
I'd like to thank you for this one, Mr. Daniel Crimmins, because Daniel Crimmins said, hey, Mike, what are we going to do for our next couple episodes? We've both been throwing ideas at each other. What are we going to come up with for you people? And Daniel came up with the great idea of talking about something that him and I both love, something that we all love and enjoy as wrestling fans, the evolution of wrestling video games, Mr. Daniel Crimmins, WWE-wise, all in all, yes.
The good,
the bad,
and the downright what the hell was that?
And I'll start. WCW Backstage Assault. Boom. A lot of people call that one of the worst video games ever.
Honestly, I think it was that, and what was the other one? I think it was Mayhem.
WCW Mayhem, yes.
I think Mayhem came out first, and I just remember playing it. I rented it from Blockbuster of all places, and I remember just playing, thinking, this game sucks. But to be fair, once THQ jumped ship, it was, WCW Thunder.
Sucked.
Like, great. And I always remember, and you can see the videos on YouTube, like, anytime you hovered over a character, you always got that little video.
Yes. It's like the whole playing thing where, where the Hulk Hogan's like, hey, you want to battle with me, brother, and whatnot, when they had the player in the menu. I thought that was cool for the WCW games. But also at the same time, like, I remember ECW also had that same whole hype about it, too, when they had Hardcore Heaven and that video game from 2000s. Mind you, the graphics, dog shit. But at the same time, ECW getting their own video game, especially where they were at that time, going towards the later 99 into the 2000.
And to be fair, like, I think we are looking at those games, graphic-wise at least, from PS5, PS4, Xbox eyes. We aren't looking at it from like PS1 and which for those times, those games look pretty solid.
I still have my PS2 today. I mean, for me, as I told you, I've come late into the wrestling game. I've been watching wrestling for 21 years. My first ever video game, wrestling-wise, that I got was WWF SmackDown, Just Bring It, and then to the Shut Your Mouth, Here Comes the Pain series, and then onward, and especially what we have now with the WWE 2K series and 2K20, what the actual fuck? You want to talk about what the fuck, those graphics? Oh, my God. And the botches and the glitches. Ugh, what a...
And you know what? And what... Well, the common wrestling fan doesn't really know why that game happened. If they look at it and they just think, well, what happened? Why? What had happened? The previous maker of the game, the publisher, which are the people that actually make this shit, was a company called Ucaged. They made literally every WWE game from WrestleMania 2000 all the way up until WWE 2K19. Contract was up, and they were, negotiating as typically any business does. 2K kind of looked at like, well, we've got our own in-house team. Why are we paying you X amount? We'll make it for Y. Uke's basically just like, okay, we'll go. But see, the coding is their exclusive property. 2K couldn't use it. So they had to build the game up from the ground floor. So it's like a house. When you build a house, you put the frame up first, then everything else, then the shell, right? Mike, how well would it work out if you made the exterior first and then the frame, then the foundation?
It wouldn't work at all. It would fall apart.
Exactly. And this game for those of you that, either never played it or maybe, you just, worked so damn hard to forget it, which, I wish I was one of those people. They gave up on it. They tried for months to fix the game, and they finally just said, yeah, we can't. We've done what we can do. So, what did they do? They canceled the next year's game completely.
Yep.
And they gave us WWE Battlegrounds, which was, kind of like Mortal Kombat-esque. It was kind of like cartoony. Like, think Mortal Kombat for kids.
I mean, for me, it has that image of like Big Show with the choke slam all the way up in the air. There's like alligators and crocodiles and all this stuff. Yeah. It's very animated.
Like, it was a game that, it was fun for a little bit, but it got real old real quick.
Yeah.
And then they came back with 2K20. Not 2K20, 2K22. Solid. 23 looks the same.
Yep.
But my first ever wrestling game, and I'll be honest, I am going to age myself greatly. Like, I can already feel my hair turning gray.
Yep.
WWF Super WrestleMania for the regular Nintendo.
Oh, that's an old one.
Yeah. To give you an idea, the box art was from WrestleMania 2. Was a picture of Hulk Hogan in the cage just trying to rip the shirt. And I'm trying. I think the roster, back then you only had like a handful. It was Ted DiBiase, Andre Hogan, Randy Savage, and I forget who else. And like you got the little 8-bit, entrance themes playing over and over again. Like there were no entrances. It was just, like having to press 50 million buttons just to get a power bomb. I don't think I ever completed one match in that whole goddamn game. I don't think I ever did. But there were some good games back in the day.
Well, for me, like I mentioned too, like me with the Just Bring It, and I'll say this on the Just Bring It side of things. Like a lot of people complain about the season mode being very short. I'm like, for what you get, it's not bad. I mean, the roster is stacked. I mean, some of the unlockables on there you can unlock if you really had to. There you can unlock Shane McMahon. You can unlock Jerry Lynn, who was the light heavyweight champion at the time. You can unlock Fred Durst, which was just nuts. They put Fred Durst in the game, which is so weird, but it was fun. Like, it was so fun.
I mean, to be fair, this year we get Logan Paul and Bad Bunny.
True. Okay. All right. But that was a big deal at the time with Fred Durst because Limp Bizkit was huge. I mean, now we get, like you mentioned, Bad Bunny and Logan Paul, but Fred Durst never wrestled the match. All he did was, but it was funny watching Fred Durst come out on you remember his little car? He used to come up, he starts dancing, and then he gets right into the ring. Like, that's the stuff that really gets me. And like that roster in 2001, you had Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, the Dudleys, the Hardys, Edge and Christian, Kurt Angle. We had Steve Blackman was in the game. Forgot Steve Blackman.
Steve Blackman.
Oh yes, good old Steve Blackman. But yeah, no, that's solid roster. Spike Dudley, Molly Holly, the girls at the time.
Yeah.
Were you Just Bring It winner?
Oh yeah, I love the SmackDown games back in the day, and I think it was Just Bring It. Maybe I'm wrong. I think that was the one where like one of the backstage areas, like you could wrestle in WWF New York.
Yes.
Like right outside.
Yep.
And you could climb the arena or climb the stage area, and you could climb the exterior, the canopy of the venue.
Mm-hmm.
Which, folks, that is still there. I mean, it's a Hard Rock Cafe now. But for those of us that have been there, which, Mike, you've been there before, right?
I remember having a meatball sandwich at the World back in the day, WWF New York. Yes, sir.
So you would, if you were to walk by that now, you would look at it and you'd just say, that was WWF New York.
Yep, and people would look at us like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, if you know, you know. If you know,
exactly.
You know.
For those of us wrestling fans, we knew. And honestly, it worked. It worked.
It did.
And there have been like some good wrestling games, and just
Yeah.
and
Well,
I will be honest, one that I am watching. I mean, the WWE game is going to do well.
yes.
It's the one that I am anxiously watching, and that I really hope does well, is the AEW game.
Yes. Now, do we have a confirmation of when they're finally going to release the doggone thing?
So there have been rumors. The recent rumor, Best Buy on their website had it listed as March 31st of 2023. So we're a month away.
Yep.
If that happens, I will be honest, people, I don't think it's releasing that date. And I
Me.
will tell you why.
Go ahead.
Number one, where's the promotional? You're telling me that you are going to release a game in a month with no promotion?
Right. I mean, they had like that one commercial with like Tony Schiavone and Britt Baker, but that was it.
Not only that, but 2 weeks before, we are getting WWE 2K23.
Hey now.
It
Right.
is not, I mean, could they do it? Yeah. But from a business perspective, if I am advising Tony Khan, which FTK, if you know, you know.
You know, you know.
Um, if I'm advising Tony Khan, I'm saying, look, June, May, June. That way, let WWE, let that game kind of simmer in the pot for a bit. In the meantime, you take out an ad blitz. I know they have sunk a fortune into this game. They need this game to do well. And I'm not saying, hey, if the game fails, then the company fails. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, for there to be any kind of future with this game, they need it to be a financial success.
Yeah. And I mean, it's different because a lot of people are also comparing the gameplay and the overall structure and the model of it to one of our favorites, which we'll get to here in a second, SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. If we have something like we have with Here Comes the Pain, it's going to be special, and it's going to see something that we saw in 03 now in 2023. So, I mean, and I really wanted to see it do well, and I'm curious to see how the game's going to look. It's a stacked roster already who's in the game.
We're getting, like me, I'm a big fan of steel cage matches and games. I love them. I loved, I believe it was Shut Your Mouth, SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, that the first time that Hell in a Cell was, the whole ring, and it wasn't just like a steel cage with a roof on it.
Yeah, this one was like the whole thing in SmackDown Shut Your Mouth. Yep.
And I'm really curious to see how the AEW steel cage game, or how the steel cage match in their game plays. Which I will be honest, the thing about the WWE 2K23 that I am hyped for, and me, I don't get hype, I stay hyped.
Yep. Yep.
Mojo Rawley.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
going to have, and to quote one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, War Games.
War Games.
The first time ever we are getting the War Games match in a video game.
I saw the trailer for it. It looks sweet. It looks really, really crisp.
And the great thing is the little space in between rings, they've confirmed you can play in that part.
It makes me smile just thinking about it. Like just how they have it, the little attention to detail, the precisiveness. Like that's what makes it cool, makes it worth getting. And I have to ask you about this because you talk about the Hell in a Cell in 2002. What I always used to love about the SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, and this will be a two-parter here. The Hell in a Cell every time in season mode would be the Armageddon Hell in a Cell, like we saw at Armageddon 2000. But I have to ask you, a lot of people kind of say, besides Here Comes the Pain, the Shut Your Mouth season mode. It's a 2-year season mode. Were you a fan of that season mode? I think that's got to list up as one of the best ones ever.
I like that whole thing, and I like that you could kind of pick and choose different paths.
Yep.
I enjoyed that. I like a good story mode, and I will say the WWE 2K21 was stupid. Bionic Samoa Joe.
What, you're not a fan of Buzz and Red and Trey and Red and Buzz and all them and Cole Quinn? Come on.
Samoa Joe with like a robotic arm made no sense.
That's what they did. That's what they went for.
Like, give me a simple story where you got a guy or a gal who's, on the indies, is trying to work her way up to NXT, main roster. Do that. It works.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of with Samoa Joe and his bionic arm. You bring that up. I'll put this image into folks' head. When Brian Cage had the weapon of the gods that he used to wear at Lucha Underground that time. Remember that? He had the arm.
Yeah.
Oh God. But no, that's the thing too. Like, it's not simple anymore. Like, a lot of people say this. I think you can agree. One of the best road to WrestleManias was SmackDown versus Raw 2011.
Yeah. And dude, honestly, like sometimes simplicity works.
Mhm.
Like, I'll use the AEW game for a brief moment. You've seen some like the images and all that, like the little mini games. Why?
I don't know. It reminds me when we used to do that, like the lockup battles on like the SmackDown versus Raw 6s and all that, where you could shove, where you could do the lockups and stuff like that. That's where it kind of reminds me.
I hated those.
They wanted to mix it up. They wanted to do this stuff. They wanted to make sure how you get it before the X or when it times out. I remember.
What concerns me, and I will say I do have some concerns. And there's a guy on YouTube that I watch his videos. His username is Assemble. Like he does a lot of like the wrestling games. He's he did a video about the AEW game and some updates. One of the concerns I have, and I feel it is a valid concern, we still don't know a whole lot about the game.
No, just like you mentioned.
Is there a create mode? Is it create a superstar? Can we create like matches, arenas? Like, can we do that? Is there a story? I've heard there's a story mode. What kind of story mode is it? There's a lot they can do, and I know Kenny was even kind of let it be known that he would have liked the game to have come out already.
I mean,
Like, there was a story that they had to scale back the blood, which the way they described it, and I heard it described the way it used to look, the mat would have looked like something out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
well, I think that's also the main cause of it, Dan, is because they do too much blood in the doggone thing. And I mean, that's the AEW product and what it consists of. But it's just like, come on now, for video games like that,
And the Electronic Software Ratings Board, the ESRB, said, okay, we'll prove it, but not for teen. It's going to be rated mature, which a wrestling game rated M, it wouldn't. The hardcore fans would buy it and would love it. The casual fan, like if you had kids and you're out shopping and your kid points to the AEW game that's Fight for the Fallen or Fight Forever, whatever the exact title is, and next to that you see WWE 2K23 that's rated T for teen.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a parent and you have young kids, and you can pick what you can get them one or the other. Are you going to go for the game that's rated M, or are you going to go with the game that's rated T?
Now, I'll say this: if I'm a parent or just as I'm an uncle or I'm a cousin who also has a cousin who enjoys wrestling, I'm going right for rated T for teen. I'm going for WWE 2K23.
I mean, even though that's, I mean, I seem to remember one of the WWE games having a bra and panties match.
Well, I mean, that started in like probably around SmackDown. Here Comes the Pain is when they started the bra and panties matches.
Yeah, that's the one. I knew it was only in like one or two of the games.
Yeah, it was in SmackDown versus Raw, the first one. And then I think 2006, they did, remember the Fulfill Your Fantasy Battle Royal? Oh my God, they did that. They started doing those. Yep.
Yeah, that was weird.
It was.
Now, there was some really, really weird things. And let's talk about some of the not the funny weird, but just the downright bizarre.
Mhm.
If you remember, I believe it was the initial SmackDown versus Raw. There was a storyline
I know where
between
you're
Guerrero and The Undertaker.
So what he's referring to, folks, is SmackDown versus Raw '06, where Eddie Guerrero takes control of the urn. You know what I'm saying? And then your character gets into it with the Undertaker, and you side with Eddie Guerrero, but then he gives you the fake urn, and then he makes you fight the Undertaker in a buried alive match going towards Survivor Series. Eddie Guerrero takes control of the urn.
And then the way it ends with Undertaker tombstoning Eddie Guerrero at the gravesite and tossing him into the casket. And then there's a cutscene of the casket being lowered down and then the dirt being dumped onto the casket. Now, you'd think that you'd say, oh, well, what's so strange about that? What's strange about that is the fact that this released, I believe it was a couple of weeks. I think it was after Eddie passed. It was like a week or two after.
Yeah, it was right after Guerrero died.
I remember people thinking, well, why didn't they change it? That's insensitive. Blah, blah, blah. Folks, you got to realize for them to do that, not only was the game already done, but it had already been shipped to retailers. It would have cost a fortune to recall the game, redo it, destroy the copies, and you're talking a re-release wouldn't be done until April. It would have taken months.
Right. And
so they didn't have a choice. They basically just said, screw it.
It reminds me of, and I'll make another equivalent to this, SmackDown vs. Raw '07 when Benoit's fighting The Undertaker. The Undertaker's like, I won't be, the immediate death of what your family will have to deal with, what you're going through if you come at me, your immediate family, what the future holds for you. It was something along those lines that was very creepy.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, Chris Benoit literally did this like before this game.
A couple months later, and then this happens.
And then this happens. It was odd, but I mean, that stuff, I mean, like you mentioned, well, the SmackDown vs. Raw '06, one of the great paths I loved, you would go on the Legends tour, and you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, Jimmy Hart, you had The Rock, you had Roddy Piper, you had all these people, these legends on the tour, Mankind, and it was fun. It was good. It made for a hell of a Legends tour. I think that was the first time we saw it. They tried to do it again in '07 with like Bam Bam Bigelow was in that one, and so many others, but those were cool. I mean, all right, I got to talk about it since you mentioned SmackDown vs. Raw '06. The Teddy Long gets run over by the car, and who did it? Because Tori Wilson found Teddy Long in the parking lot, and then once you get towards the Royal Rumble, you find out that your character did it, and then Teddy Long makes you go through hoops and cage matches to get to WrestleMania, and it's like, do you want to stay on SmackDown and feel Teddy's wrath going into WrestleMania, or do you want to go to Raw and face Triple H? That is one of the storylines that did also happen. The
one-on-one with the
Undertaker. But yeah, no, that was one of the big ones, was Teddy Long getting ran over, or the one with Triple H and Shelton Benjamin. They were fighting, and your character gets to choose: do you want to go after Shelton or do you want to go after Triple H? There's the one with Eugene and William Regal, where they're feuding with Edge and Christian, who now reunited for the tag titles. Yep. It was a good season mode. It was an interesting one, SmackDown vs. Raw '06.
It was campy, but it was fun.
It was.
Now, I remember a game, and I know you have, having a PS2. Maybe you played this, maybe you didn't. The Legends of Wrestling series.
I enjoyed it. They had Andy Kaufman in the game, which was fun.
The games were so bad.
It was bad, but I enjoyed Andy Kaufman. That is the only part
the rosters were incredible. Like, of the three, the third one, Showdown Legends of Wrestling, to me was good. It was good. Excuse me.
Out of all of them, yes, I would say that. But I think from that series, I mean, for me, this was also around the time when I'm going to put this like this. You had the Legends of WrestleMania, those three that came out, but one I also gravitated towards besides those, and that was the infamous TNA Impact video game, the one and only TNA Impact video game that came out, where Suicide, which then became a character voiced by Low Key, Kazarian, Christopher Daniels, TJP. Yes, and Austin Aries, thank you. And they're in Mexico. They take you out. You don't remember who you are, and then you have to go through the hoops. Were you a fan of the TNA Impact video game?
I never played it. It looked stupid.
Okay. Daniel Crimmins. Oof. A lot of people have said this is one of the worst ones ever. I will refute that because we've seen more with WCW Backstage Assault. And I will also refute and say, I don't know if you played this one, WWE Crush Hour, which was like Twisted Metal with WWE. They had like everything you could shoot at.
Let me preface that. I don't count that as a wrestling game.
It came out like early 03 for those who've never seen it. It was
I know of it. I never played it because to me, if I want to play a game with wrestlers, let's play a wrestling game.
Okay, I'm gonna one up you on this. Did you ever play Def Jam Vendetta, which was rappers wrestling?
No, I
Okay.
wanted to, but when you grow up or grew up in a family where rap was, and dude, I'm a rocker.
Yeah.
If they had released a game that had like allowed me to play as Jimi Hendrix and beat the living hell out of John Lennon, sign me up. I am all for it. Or if you had like one where it's historical figures, like to me, if you had the ability of having like a Hell in a Cell with Abraham Lincoln versus George Washington.
I like it, but no, that was the thing. It was big at the time because you go through the hoops to go get your girl, and there's a lot of arrests and shootings and just fighting and like street thug stuff. It was cool for that time period, but also at the same time, like this was around, like we mentioned, the crush hours and stuff like that. But for me, like I was always around those video games and those season modes, like you talk about telling a story. A lot of people also refute and they'll debate which do you feel was the better wrestling game because some argue that No Mercy was the greatest wrestling game of all time, and others will say SmackDown Here Comes the Pain in an argument of which is better. What say you?
Having played both, I gotta go with No Mercy.
Good choice. Good choice.
It's supposedly AEW's Fight Forever is supposed to be like No Mercy. It's made by the same exact team. Like it was made by a company called AKI, based in Japan. Kenny Omega traveled to Japan, found this company who, they still exist, but they're not going under that name. He found them. These people have not made a wrestling game in over 20 years and convinced them to do it again. So I want this to work. Like, I would love to play a game that has that kind of control style. Because, one of the worst things that you can do, some people like the Mortal Kombat style where you have to press 50 million buttons to get a simple punch. I will be honest, I suck at Mortal Kombat. I like Mortal Kombat. I love the idea of it, but dude, I suck. So I want it to work. I really do.
Me too. And the thing too is as well, like you talk about the newer ones like that. And I'll say this right now for video games and stuff like that. Like I'm gonna say this because we talk about SmackDown vs. Raw 2011, going for the streak, and we go for everything that goes in there, different season modes with Cena and whatnot from 09 to 2011. Same Magnifique, same with the SmackDown vs. Raw series. But once we got to WWE 12, like for me, the storylines with Sheamus and the United Kingdom with McIntyre, the whole nine there, Wade Barrett and William Regal, like going intertwining with Triple H and the legends with Arn Anderson, and of course Jacob Cass, who was voiced by Austin Aries in a WWE video game. What were your thoughts on WWE 12? Because that also gave us the first one out of the SmackDown versus Raw series.
Well, I remember that because with that one, previously you had SmackDown was the PlayStation.
Yep.
You had Raw being, the Xbox. Then Xbox had, I believe they had WrestleMania 21, and you had some cool stuff. I think this was the first time where they're just like, what, screw it, we're just going to do one game, for both systems. Play it, don't play it, whatever. It was good, but this was also at the time where you realize that hey, THQ was not in good shape.
Oh no, oh no.
And I remember WWE 12 just being a glitch fest.
That it was. Oh, it was slow. It had the glitchy feeling to it. I loved the game. It was great. It was great from the storytelling side, but the gameplay was very slow, and it was very slow motiony. It didn't have a good feel.
WWE 13, we had, Phil Brooks on the cover, which I could rant about that guy for, hours.
Yep.
You know my feelings about him.
I know how you feel, yeah. But I mean, at the time, he was one of the biggest draws in that company. And I mean, the Attitude Era, they placed at the Jim Ross interview, CM Punk Stone Cold, we're going to get in the game. That was the big draw of it. And that introduced the Attitude Era mode.
You know what? That's the sad part because it's like, people always talk about wrestling matches that never were.
Hmm?
I got to think a CM Punk versus Steve Austin match would have been stellar.
Agreed.
But no. He took his ball and went home. Both of them kind of took their ball and went home.
Yeah, but Austin did it first, right? No, two. Yep.
More than once.
Well, all right, here's the thing. When Austin did it, it was, he was supposed to face Brock in the King of the Ring, and that wasn't the reason why he quit. It was just like, this is a paper match. Like, why are we doing this on Raw? But that's the thing, man. It was such a weird time. And I remember at the time, Austin was feuding with Eddie Guerrero, like going into like King of the Ring, and he was getting beat up by Eddie Guerrero in like a bar or something like that. Like he was gonna feud with Eddie Guerrero, which not a bad feud, but then that turned into Ric Flair and Eddie Guerrero.
And then just automatic. And I get it. Like, I get Austin's frustration, but like, and he even said this, I remember the interview he did with Brock where he said, I had no problems working with you or putting you over. My whole thing was, why are we doing a pay-per-view match? Why are we giving it away for free?
Exactly.
That would be, to me, akin to nowadays doing MJF versus Daniel Bryan, or if you were to book Kenny Omega versus MJF, would you put that on a regular old episode of Dynamite or Rampage?
No.
You would. I mean, you could have it, but have it end up, where the match doesn't take place. Where maybe before the bell rings, he just comes out, beats him up, and so that way it gets people to want it even more.
Right. And that's
dangle the carrot.
Angle the character, yeah. Well, it reminds me of, remember when Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar fought and like the SmackDown, like going towards WrestleMania, but it turns out it was his brother Eric Angle in disguise. You know what I'm saying? Like that was fun, to get to the WrestleMania 19 match. But you can't do stuff like that. I mean, people argue about Goldberg and Hogan and having Goldberg win it in the Georgia Dome when it could have been on a pay-per-view. I mean, that was a hell of a bout for a Monday Nitro, and it got them big ratings, but you could have done it on a pay-per-view.
Well, to be fair, they did it because of the location.
Yes.
Goldberg was a member of the Atlanta Falcons. Where did he play? The Georgia Dome. Why wouldn't you do it there?
True.
I'm more surprised that Hogan, let him go over clean, but I digress.
Oh, dude, I watched the NWO biography. Holy hell. I'm going to say this about Stone Cold. The reason why the NWO failed because Hulk, Eric Bischoff was a mark for Paul Nash. Hello, Hulk. He was a mark for you, you son of a gun. He catered to you more with your creative, freedom and creative control. Hogan trying to just act like this. Did you watch the stuff that he said on biography? Oh, my God. Oh, my God. You have to watch the NWO biography.
For the whole thing with Hulk Hogan, I'm just going to say, to hell with Hogan.
Yeah.
He's a piece of shit. I'm sorry. It's, for all the credit that he gets, he's also done some pretty horrible things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he got booed out of the building at WrestleMania with Titus O'Neil.
Gee, I wonder why.
Wonder why. Exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Let's not forget calling the Superdome the Astrodome. Or no, what? No, he called it the Silverdome.
Silverdome, yes. With The Rock and Stone Cold at WrestleMania 30.
And
But
then just them just looking at him, just saying, "Dude, do you know where we are? What city we're in?"
I gotta ask you as well, because we talk about players that have been in games. Here's some of the more like fun ones that like only made the game like a few times. Like Maven, for the love of God, was in SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, and you had Planet Stasiak, Sean Stasiak. It's crazy to think a lot of Muhammad Hassan in SmackDown vs. Raw 06, which bugged the hell out of me. I'll tell you why. When you start the game and you see who the champions are, like, why are him and Kazuro Davari the SmackDown Tag Team Champions? Like, it made no sense. Do you remember that?
I did.
Like, that made no sense. Like, why out of all people are you making them the SmackDown Tag Team Champions? It made no sense.
I forget who were the champions. If I remember, I think I remember reading a story where they were slated to win.
Mm-hmm.
So what I wonder is if they told, THQ said, "Hey, these guys are going to be the champions," and then they thought, "Oh, okay, we'll just put it in the game." Maybe.
I mean, at the time, like, the champs were Brian Kendrick and Paul London. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. But
The
it's
guy
interesting.
who got fired just because he smiled at Vince McMahon.
I mean, he says that wasn't the reason, but that had to be an inkling of it, because Paul, and I like Paul London, I really do, but he didn't. He doesn't help himself with what he says. Very outspoken individual, and Brian Kendrick is Brian Kendrick.
Brian Kendrick.
Yeah, so I don't know, man, but yeah, that's the thing too. And what's crazy about the time period as well, like SmackDown versus Raw 2008. I'll mention this. This was, as if you remember the cover of it, it was SmackDown versus Raw 2008 featuring ECW. And what you think of the fact that they put people like Elijah Burke, Marcus Corvan, the Sandman, Sabu, and all these players in the game for a week?
I loved it. That was I believe the first time when we had the Extreme Rules match where, you had a, barbed wire 2x4. You had, being able to light a table on fire.
Yep, that was the first one.
I love that. And, you were allowed to wrestle in the crowd.
Yep.
Which is cool.
Yep. I mean, they started that with SmackDown vs. Raw 07, but 08 you had a little bit more room to like fight in the crowd, which was nice.
Yeah. And now, see, like I said, I remember the games where they were kind of campy and blocky, and now it's like, yeah, it's strange how lifelike things are. But I love it. I absolutely love it. And seeing what's cool that I like that the 2K games do, they have the spot, the what do they call it, like spotlight or focus or whatever they do.
Mm-hmm.
The focus this year is on Johan Cena.
Yes, the spotlight, the overall, just going through his career, the career mode of Cena, and the whole nine. I
The
love that.
showcase,
The
Superstar
showcase.
Showcase.
Thank you.
And last year they had Rey Mysterio. And one of the common complaints was that you're only ever playing as the focus, the start. So it's like, your person's gonna win.
Mm-hmm.
Although last year's with Rey was kind of interesting, where the match, excuse me, I believe it was Halloween Havoc in 1997 with Eddie Guerrero and Rey.
Mm-hmm.
If you lost to Eddie, they included a cutscene where Eddie legit rips the mask off, that purple one.
Yes.
And like Eddie holds it up after the match, which, we know it didn't happen that way, but the fact that they created that, I don't know, I think that's kind of cool.
And it's funny because, like you mentioned that match, like the only other time we got to see that kind of like sort of relived was WWE 12 when Rey, they said, here's a showcase of what happened back in the day, and you got to play that match in WWE 12. But yeah, that's a nice little end of detail right there. And for me, like you talk about the showcase, like with Cena, you could do the RVD match from One Night Stand 06. Looks like they're going to include, there's a lot of stuff you can include for a John Cena showcase. And for me, like, I love seeing that. And I mean, a lot of people want the Road to WrestleManias back. Do you want to see the Road to WrestleManias back?
if they do it right. You know, I think I would love to see that, but have it be for NXT.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, where you pick somebody from NXT, let's say Braun Breaker. You know, you start NXT and then, you know, you try and get to Mania. Like, have it start literally the night after it's WWE Draft. And, you know, depending on what brand you pick, that's what you get. Like, you get a story, you get storylines based on whichever brand you choose.
I like that, and I think yeah, and it's great for the developmental process. And I think for me, I'm going to speak about developmental here. Here's the development of Bray Wyatt in video games, because we talk about superstars and great talents that have been in video games. The evolution from Bray Wyatt when he was Husky Harris in WWE 12 to what we get to see now with the Fiend and Bray Wyatt in video games. Like, dude, his first video game was WWE 12 as Husky Harris.
That guy.
That guy. That guy.
Now, what I like with this one, with the Cena Superstar Showcase, is that now with this one it's different, where you're not just playing the, you know, knowing that Cena's going to win, like you're playing, you know, his opponent, so you're wrestling or you're fighting John Cena with trying to beat him.
Mm-hmm.
We've never had that before.
No,
and I kind of like. I think that's kind of cool.
Me too, and I mean, automatically you knew who was going to win, and like the other ones were the showcase, but like you get to have the roles reversed, and for me, like there's a lot of Cena matches that a lot of people wish they could undo. You know what I'm saying? That a lot of people like to see undone. Like a lot of people wanted to see Umaga beat him at Royal Rumble, Last Man Standing. A lot of people want to see different opponents beat him, so it's very interesting to have the roles reversed.
Bray Wyatt.
Bray Wyatt, of course, WrestleMania 30, which we'll get into in our next episode, but. Man, it's so interesting to see the games, how far they've come, and just the nostalgia here. So I got to ask you, if you had to pick, what is the worst wrestling game on your list?
That's tough because there have been quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a twofer.
Okay.
Number one,
Mm-hmm.
WCW Thunder for the PlayStation 1.
Oh, that's really taking it back. Yes.
Actually, no, I'm going to do a tie. There's a three-way tie. WCW Nitro, also for the PS1. WCW Thunder, and as much as I hate to say it, WWE 2K20.
All right. My list is WWE 2K20 ranks up there just because, as we mentioned, I would probably have to say Raw 2 on the Xbox was the shits because it was limited. You know what it is? At number 3, I'll also put in there, like, oh man, and it's going to pain me to do this too. I mean, WCW Backstage Assault would go in that list. So that if I had to pick 3, that would be 3, because I had high hopes for Backstage Assault, but then it just got old quickly and it just is terrible. And I mean, this was also around the time. Do you even want to count the backyard wrestling games in there? I mean, were you a backyard wrestling fan with the IC?
I never played them because, you know, just to me it sounded weird, but I know they've got like a cult-like following.
I mean, Sanjay Dutt's in the fucking video game, for God's sake.
ICP is in the video game.
Yes, ICP. And it's just they fight in different areas, and it's very backyardish, and you get to fight rappers and some wrestlers in there that you saw in like XPW and stuff. But it was a cult following. It was a very niche product. And I mean, you mentioned Nintendo there, Mr. Daniel Crimmins, and your old ass with your Nintendo. Did you ever play? A lot of people rave about these ones, WWE Day of Reckoning 1 and 2?
See, I never had a GameCube, so I never got to play them.
Okay.
But I know those are some of the most beloved video games for, you know, wrestling games.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that people still play these, and you know they're akin to No Mercy, shows that there's still a market for it.
I'll say this right now. Behind me, folks, is my PlayStation. Is my PS2. Pick it up for everybody to see it. Boom. You know what I'm saying? Boom. There's my PS2. What's in there right now is the old SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. Like, I still play that to this day. It's my jam. And a lot of people's jams talk about season mode and different cuts of very, you know, reminiscent to life. Like, it's a thing. People love the arcade style video games, and 20 years later, it still holds up.
Exactly. Like And it's being said that that's kind of the style that they're going with in the AEW game, which, now I'll put it this way. I think the more wrestling games that are out there, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people like the simulation base, they like what the WWE games have to offer. Which, if that's the kind of game you like, good, cool, go for that. But if you like, the kind of like arcade style, you got the fight forever. When we say arcade, that just reminded me WrestleMania Arcade.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
To me, where you had Undertaker and you had Doink the Clown, who had like these weird, like, a giant hand. Undertaker would have a tombstone in each hand, and he would just like smash you in the head. And then going back to 2K20, that was just really, really weird. They had the different settings, like they had like different locations you could wrestle. Like they had a graveyard thing, like where you had to wrestle like 10 different guys, and one of them was the Fiend.
Yeah.
What that basically was, that was the Boneyard.
True. And I mean, well, also makes me think of like going through the multiverse with Matt Hardy, and then you're fighting like Bray Wyatt and Nikki Cross, who's just creepy doing like the Exorcist stuff, like that stuff that's very supernatural esque. And I mean, I look at it from a stance too as well. Like I loved, like you talk about the graveyard and stuff. We mentioned buried alive matches, and we mentioned just everything that goes into that. You bring those back, and I will say this: like I'm curious to see if they ever put like we saw it at WrestleMania. I would love to see like a Firefly Funhouse type match in a video game because I think that would be very interesting in how they would pull that off.
Yeah. Well, it's like with the arcade style, it can work if it's done right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would absolutely love it. I would love to have a buried alive match again. I didn't like how, you toss from the casket, you get a stupid mini game.
Yes. That's why I would pray about doing the finishers, and then it would just say "rest in peace," and then the casket closes. Like I'm not a big mini game kind of guy when you're trying to put them in the casket either. I'm not. I mean, for you, what I hated was you go from the normal controls on the PS2, and then when you get to SmackDown versus Raw 06 and 07, they fucking changed it in the games, and what used to be this button is now this button, and they fucked it all up.
Yeah. And like, it's just like, hey, this is what it is now. No practice.
Okay, no practice. I mean, didn't they do a tutorial for one of them? I think SmackDown versus Raw 08 or 09, they did a tutorial for a couple of them. Yeah.
And changed it with 2K22, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
they made it like a mini game where you're in the performance center with Drew Gulak.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think that's kind of cool.
I agree. And I mean, I'll say this for the first and foremost, 2K22 story mode beat the dog shit out of 2K20, which was not hard, where you had, your character and then the male character. You interacted with a lot of people going after like the women's intercontinental title and all. Yes. It was like that season mode was just really, really good. And you get to go different realms. And Mandy Rose was the GM. Adam Pearce was on SmackDown. Like it was fun. It was very interactive.
It was fun. And you know what? We talk arcade. You may not have never played this. This game has a cult following, and if you can find one of the cabinets for it, good freaking luck. WWF WrestleFest.
Not to be confused with Summer.
But WrestleFest, like there were two modes. There was a Royal Rumble mode, and there was, what was it? There was like a tag team tournament. Like it was like you had Demolition, you had Legion of Doom, and like you had Warrior, Hogan, Earthquake, a couple different people. And I just remember playing it, and loving it. And like I always want, my team was always Earthquake and Warrior. Weird combination, but it worked.
All right. Yeah. All right. I'll do this up because we mentioned like okay, I got to go back to when you mentioned Battlegrounds and the larger than life and like their bodies and stuff. Were you a WWE All Stars fan? Because I did have back that for the week. No.
Hell no.
A lot of people hated it. A lot of people hated it. They really hated that game so much.
It was the same thing with Legends of WrestleMania. I didn't like the art, the over enhanced look of it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it looked stupid. I just didn't like that. They're really with Legends of WrestleMania. There was nothing to do.
Right.
It was just like, oh, hey, here are the legends. Here you go.
That's what All Stars like, because it's just like, okay, here's the story. You're gonna have to go through everybody to get to the Undertaker. That's it. That was literally the game. That was literally the game.
So was this game written by Teddy Long? You gotta go through everybody, and then you go one-on-one with the Undertaker.
I know there was other stuff in it, but that was the main premise. And I miss like modes like Slobber Knocker. For those that remember the Slobber Knocker in the games,
Yeah.
I love those modes. They don't bring that back anymore. Like I love just eliminating everybody one by one with your finisher and just going through the gauntlet. I love that stuff. Like it's simple.
Over and over. And people say, well, did it ever end? Like, yeah, it
once,
did.
Once you got to 100, it ended.
101.
101. Thank you.
Which is weird. Like, why not stop at 100? Like, I never understood that.
I don't know. But it was just like I remember playing as Stone Cold, stunner after stunner after stunner after stunner, and then maybe just another different move. But yeah, it was interesting. It was unique. I remember that was on SmackDown, Just Bring It. Then it carried over to Shut Your Mouth. I don't think it was on 03. I think it stopped after Here Comes the Pain. It was like very short lived,
I feel like it came back 1 year and then that was it. I don't remember, but honestly, it was fun. People wanted to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And like special referee mode was fun. Like I remember when it was on No Mercy, like somebody could get locked in a submission and immediately, like you could go up and push a button and it did the whole, do you want to give up? Do you want to give up? And if they said yes, you could just be like, or you could literally pull a Montreal. Let's say somebody gets locked in a full Nelson. Immediately, you're calling for the bell.
It was probably that's another one that everybody wants back, the special referee mode, because like you mentioned, it was fun. It was
you
good.
Could have. I remember playing with it was. I remember my brother and his friends and I. We would always play it. I would do this. I would be the special referee, and like, I was always the rotten little bastard. Like, I would always pick one person who I was going to pick on. If they would get, if somebody would pin them immediately, I would go like 1, 2, 3. Like I remember one time they did an Iron Man match. Like I would just be like 1, 2, 3, like literally fast counts. I would do like submissions, and they would just finally have to say, "Dan, will you just stop it? Like just call it fair." And the last time they did, I forget, maybe it was 2K16, but they brought it back, and like you could still kind of do that, but if you did it too much, John Laurinaitis' music would hit, and he would just say, "We need our officials to be fair. As a result, I am removing you from this match." And then that's stupid.
Stupid. I remember that. Yes, that was correct. 2K16, John Laurinaitis would come out and remove the official. For me, like I'm gonna say this, like I loved with the story. I mean, I remember also how they kind of carried in the story. I don't know if you remember this from like SmackDown versus Raw 09. They had that Better Than Utopia when MVP created like his own country when John Cena was feud with MVP, and there was that Soldier Tony and all that. They carried that into SmackDown versus Raw 2011, and the Undertaker against the Undertaker against the Boogeyman and friggin' SmackDown vs. Raw 2010, or it might have been 09. I can't remember. It was one of the two. But like the Boogeyman, and Santino and Finley were zombies. Like weird, but it worked. It was funny.
Tony.
Just what's the soldier's name?
Literally. It was just like no name, not like, Tony Jones or Tony Smith.
Just Tony, my man Tony.
And he served in the military with Cena. We all know Cena didn't serve.
Yeah. But we know how John Cena feels about the dog. It was the dog tag thing, and then you had like Umaga get involved, and William Regal and MVP's better than Utopia, like we mentioned. But that was like some of the storylines that we got. And I mean, Chris Jericho in Triple H and SmackDown vs. Raw 2011, where he got him into the Jerichon 5000 or whatever it was. Like that was cool. Like there was some cool stuff in there. The weird one for me was, remember Edge and Christian? You get to fight, and then you get to choose who you're going to cash in the Money in the Bank on. There was one point in there where they wrestled the tag team champions in that season mode, that Road to WrestleMania. Remember who the tag champs were?
No.
It was a random one. It was R-Truth and Mike Knox, and they called themselves Truth and Consequences. It was legit Truth and Consequences. They legit had Mike Knox and R-Truth as the tag team champions, and they were called Truth and Consequences.
Because of course.
Oh, but no, that was the thing. I mean, first of all, you know what I bring back? I would love to see the hardcore title come back. Like, I love the hardcore title.
There's so much they could do, and I get that they don't really want violence to be a thing because, violent video games, you don't get a T for T rating. But I will be honest, I love that the AEW game is going to have a death match.
First time ever in a game, yeah.
Like, it's going to have the exploding ring. Let's hope that it actually is,
explosive,
functioning.
But yeah, no.
I seriously hope to God Tony Khan got his money back.
I hope so too. Like that stuff is cool. Now that brings me to one I have to ask you about. I think there were like very like briefly New Japan games. Now I know there is a couple ones out there. I did not play them. Do you recall these at all?
Yeah, I actually remember playing one of them. I think they were called. Now, there's a couple different ones. There's Fire Pro Wrestling, which are some of the most loved wrestling games. Like, the average fan doesn't know about them, but they actually released a game a number of years back, maybe like 2017-ish?
Okay.
2017, 2018. It was Fire Pro Wrestling World. And what that was, it was Fire Pro Wrestling featuring the guys of New Japan Pro Wrestling. So you had guys like Tama Tonga Loa, you had Tetsuya Naito, you had Kenny Omega. You could create matches. You could create like a barbed wire death match. Those games were notorious for customization. But as far as like a regular New Japan game, yeah, they did have those. I think they were called like Wrestle Kingdom, actually. Like,
yes.
if you look hard enough, you can usually find like import copies on eBay. That will be like region free. So like you just have to make sure you have a system that play it.
Right. I mean, I just found a couple of them. There is an All Japan Pro Wrestling featuring virtual. There's an All Japan one. There's a New Japan Pro Wrestling Tokon Retsuden Super Fire Pro. The only reason I remember this is because one of these had Brock Lesnar in it when he was in New Japan for that short period of time. Like that was very interesting to see, like a young Brock Lesnar and a young Shinsuke Nakamura in that. So those are like very rare to find if you are a wrestling video game collector.
And even if you're not, even if you're a video game collector, they're worth money.
They are. Absolutely. And I remember as a time, and I think you can equate this, when wrestling television, like if you're watching on the WWE product, wherever, when wrestling is bad from a creative standpoint, a lot of people were like, I'd rather play the games than actually watch this because a lot of the story in there was really, really good.
Yeah, and not only that, but like you can create. Like, I remember being a little kid and like creating like storylines in my head, and like I will be honest, even now, I will, full transparency and full disclosure, I haven't watched a full show of anything You know, be it Raw, be it WWE, AEW, anything. And I can't remember how long because it's hard.
Yes.
Which, okay, I do have to bring this up because I think it's really freaking awesome they did it. WWE 2K23. You know, one of the big gripes that they get is they double up or triple up on characters.
Hmm.
You know, like you might have like 5 different John Cenas or 5 different Rey Mysterios. Well, this year we get 2 different versions of Elias. You get where I'm going with this?
Elias and Ezekiel.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's great.
And what I love is, you know, they incorporate up, down, down with this, which is, you know, shout out to Xavier Woods for you know doing that. They did the rating reveal. You know, they ask Ezekiel. They're like, well, how? Or they ask Elias, like, how's Ezekiel doing? He said, well, I'll be honest, I don't think he's coming back. I don't think we're ever gonna see him again. He's in a coma, non-responsive. They gave Ezekiel a higher rating than Elias.
That's funny. I like that. I like that a lot. Well,
And I will be honest, the whole idea of a deathmatch in a video game, I'm curious to see how it plays because we haven't gotten a barbed wire match in a game since I believe it was the ECW game.
yeah, the Hardcore Heaven and around those time in 2000, yeah. Or there may have
Which
been,
literally,
yeah, and Anarchy Rules, I think, was the other one. I don't mean to cut you off, but wasn't ECW Anarchy Rules and they did Heat Wave?
it move. It literally, like, it just, you know, I remember playing and I'll be honest, I remember being a kid. We got the PlayStation 1. What's this? Yeah, it was the PlayStation 1. My dad and my brother brought it home, and randomly they got the first ECW game. I think it was Hardcore Revolution.
Yes.
I didn't know who any of those guys were. Like I'd seen Rob Van Dam before, so I was like, oh, I know him. Hey, Raven's in this? Like, yeah, he used to be in WCW. The other guys, I had no idea. And then I just remember seeing a barbed wire match and playing like you have to press like 8 buttons just to Irish whip them, and you know occasionally the guy would kind of reverse it and would slide under the ring, and then it's just like, well, you're just literally standing there waiting for him to come back.
Right.
And I just remember these games and the AI just being so horrible, like. And you would Irish whip your opponent into the barbed wire, and like randomly, like you would just see like a little red line on his back, and you're just like, oh god, this is stupid. It's stupid.
Stupid. I mean, well, again, this is 99 2000 graphics, and for me, dude, like, I love the fact that we have the inclusion of a death match now. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. But I will say this, and I do have a couple of final things I have to ask you. We talked about our worst video games. What would you say are your top 3? Because you mentioned 3, and I mentioned 3 for the worst. What are your top 3 favorite video games?
First, I have to go with No Mercy,
Okay.
just because the number of creative slots that you could just do so much. And I just remember loving the storyline. You could literally do Cactus Jack versus Mankind versus Dude Love.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just the different options. And I just remember just that being just a bitching. I remember loving it. I'm gonna say WWE 2K22, which to me, I also call it AEW 2K22 because the number of people that by the time that game got released were AEW superstars.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was back when Vince was like, "You're fired, you're fired, you're fired,
You're fired. Yeah. A bunch of cuts.
Like, he lined up every superstar and just like, fired, fired, fired. You're cool. Fired, fired. Can't fire you, but I want to. Not fired yet.
Okay.
And there were only a couple people that they were like, yeah, you got to take this person out. Adam Cole, Daniel Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
Which in the old days they would have just modded the game and they would have found a way. Like, do you remember Game Genie?
I think so. Yeah, that sounds familiar.
So what Game Genie was? It was a thing that allowed you to basically hack the game. Like, this was really before cheat codes were a thing. Like, the old N64 model was like, it was actually another cartridge. You would plug it in your system, then you would put the cartridge on top of it. And then you had this big freaking book that had games. Like, it had it listed by games, and like it was like that thick. Like, it was about the thickness of like a Harry Potter book.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. That's
And
sick.
like, you had to find the game. And I remember I got it one year, and I remember looking at it and thinking, like, the hell are these games? I've never heard of these.
Mm.
So then you find it, it's like, okay, well, you have to have a master code. And then you have to figure out, okay, what game do I want? Like, there was one, I think it was SmackDown Shut Your Mouth. The one where Jeff Hardy was supposed to be in it, but they cut him at the last minute.
No, that was not Shut Your Mouth. That was Here Comes the Pain. It was Jeff was supposed to be in it, and the Ultimate Warrior was supposed to be in it.
Yeah, and then Warrior, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't talk about him.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. I mean, we can talk about the war, but we won't talk about that. We won't talk about that moment. That was not good. But yeah, no, Jeff was supposed to be in it because remember then he got fired. That was his first ever. He didn't want to go to rehab. That was his first ever release from WWE.
Him not wanting to go to rehab, huh?
Yeah.
That sound familiar.
20 years later.
But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother show. Which, folks, if you want to hear us cover that, let us know.
Let us know. We'll
Leave a comment down wherever wherever these things go.
Yes, comment below what you want to see for future episodes in season 2. But for you, third video game, what would be your third top 3? You gave me the first 2. What's the top?
Let's see. I got to go with WWF WrestleFest for the arcade.
Fair enough.
Just because it's such like a nostalgia thing. Like, sometimes it's like, when you watch an old movie that you loved as a kid, the movie may be garbage, but because you have so many fond memories of playing it, you love it.
It's like wrestling fans are Ready to Rumble. Ready to Rumble is a crappy movie, but it's a gem. It's a freaking gem.
It is so bad, it's actually kind of good. And I'll do you one better. I'll do you one better. Sequel.
I would love that. I would love that so much.
Hear me out, because I've thought about this. You had the Sal Bandini character. He's obviously, now Sal's passed.
Yes.
Who takes over that role? Jimmy King.
He'll whoop that ass. Yep, I would love to see Jimmy King a part of that. Yes.
And you have Gordy Boggs, aka David Arquette, takes over the Jimmy King role.
I will bust you.
Because it's David Arquette.
Mm-hmm.
And who do you have do a cameo? Nick freaking Gage. Because you know what? Just because.
MGK all day.
I think you mean FTK.
FTK. I love it, man.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. All right, so more for my top three. I will go with, just because it stands the test of time and it's going to be 21 years old now, but it's freaking awesome. Shut Your Mouth, not just because of the 2-year season mode, but also the fact that I forgot to mention this. Dude, when you're playing like Falls Count Anywhere in a hardcore match, you could fight on the train, in the subway, and it's friggin' awesome. You can fight in the snow.
Yep.
It's
throw snowballs.
Yes, and it's bitching. And then you can try jump all the way off the Titantron. It's so good. It's so good. Here Comes the Pain. Good.
Correct me. And I think Here Comes the Pain. Well, that was one where you could climb the old SmackDown fist.
No, that was Shut Your Mouth.
Which, you know what? 2K, bring that back.
Bring it back, yes. Well, no, Here Comes the Pain was the one where they introduced the Elimination Chamber for the first time, and you could do the old Spider-Man trick where you can go off the wall. Loved it. So those would be my two. And number three, it's a toss-up between No Mercy and probably, man, it's going to be a tough one for me. But I liked SmackDown versus Raw 06, between No Mercy and SmackDown versus Raw 06. So old school ones, but also new school with the SmackDown vs. Raw series. And I love for the 2K, like for me, dude, like 2K13 was what it was. The Attitude Era mode got old, but it was good. But 2K12, yeah, but it's interesting. Those would be my three. But yeah, I think we kind of covered a lot of the games here. And I will say this, for a video game wise, AEW, I'm looking forward to it. We've said this beyond repeating. I want to see it do well. I want to see it succeed. And isn't it funny? Like, we talk about TNA games, we talk about New Japan being a rarity, the WWE games, Def Jam Vendetta, and everything that comes to fruition there, kind of like spinoffs. Isn't it interesting? I don't think we ever had a Ring of Honor video game. Have we ever had a Ring of Honor video game? I don't think we have.
I don't think they ever had the financial resources to do it.
Right.
It's funny you bring that up. Now with them being on the AEW banner.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you use that as DLC because it said they don't want it to be like an every year release. Like, they want it to be like a standalone thing and then offer like DLC, which I think what you do, you have this be the base game. And then, every couple months, have it be kind of like a Fortnite kind of thing where, you have seasons where each season, you still have the stuff from the previous season. But maybe you have you have legends. You contact legends who don't work with WWE, who aren't under legends contracts. You do that. You got guys like there's so many, and I think you give that a shot. Maybe work with New Japan.
I would like that, and the thing too is like you have all the guys in AEW from the Ring of Honor, and if you ever did a Ring of Honor video game, I would call it Code of Honor, just because Ring of Honor is synonymous with Code of Honor. But having that downloadable pack, I mean, like a Mark Briscoe and a Jay Briscoe, God rest his soul, like you could put a lot of work and variety into that. Like I love that.
That would be a great idea.
Absolutely, and for me too, and I will say this before we do tie a bow on this and close out this badass show. I want to say this to the folks: for those who enjoyed our first half of this season, it's going to keep going until we get to episode 10 because we got more topics. But the sixth episode we have coming up after this one, Dan, you add a little bit more to this because you refresh my memory, as you and I both do, being the wrestling fans that we are. We are going to talk about the 9-year anniversary of What You're Going to Pay. $9.99, the WWE Network, and the two first events.
Which you used to be able to download right off of WWE.com. You could search on the PlayStation Network, the Xbox Live Marketplace, for only $9.99. Shut up, Michael Cole. They know the price.
Right. And we're going to talk about the two events that we first had on the network around that time, NXT Arrival, and of course, WrestleMania 30. So we're going to discuss our memories and our love, and goddamn it, Brock Lesnar for ending the streak.
Where Paul Heyman's client, Brock Lesnar, conquered the streak.
Memories. And that guy's face. That guy's face. So that'll be in our next episode. And before we close this out, Daniel, we are not only weeks away from WrestleMania, but we are going to be a part of Promomania for Max Wrestling, where I will be taking on Robert Davis in a fun promo exhibition, and you have yourself a main event ticket in our little fun promo exhibition, you and the Demoness, for the TV title. Daniel Crimmins, good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing how you combat it.
The only title that means something.
Ooh, shots fired. Shots fired. Oh, I cannot wait. This is going to be good. Check out Max Wrestling. Check out what we got going here on the YouTube page for Mike Larkin 92. And Daniel Crimmins, your Instagram will be below, dcrimmins1. And do you have anything else you'd like to promote besides everything as far as the TSK go and what y'all got going on for your future episodes on the match?
We have Retro Rewinds should be dropping soon. Not sure the exact date. We have so many different products. We have my main man Harold. He's got his show where he's there with his wife out in the California sunshine. They do movie reviews. They not movie reviews. They do they tour different filming locations. You like Back to the Future? They show you the different filming locations for that. They do food reviews. So maybe you're going out to Cali. Maybe you need a couple of spots to eat. Check them out. The Two Sweet Click Adventures. Give it a look. And of course, the greatest show out of all the shows that you could be watching, the Uncaged podcast show.
As you should. And folks, coming soon to the Click Talk Network. ATN, baby. You get Uncaged, you get Max Wrestling, you get Netflix. Check it out. Links will be in the description. It's a good time to be a wrestling fan, a great time to be a wrestling podcaster. I feel good, Dan. I feel good.
I do too. And you know what else makes me feel so good to be able to say?
What?
FTK.
FTK, if you know, you know. And on that note, folks, this concludes another edition of Uncaged. We'll be back in episode 6. What you gonna pay? $9.99. We'll talk to you in the next episode. For Daniel Crimmins, my name is Mike Larkin. Thank you guys so much. And this has been Uncaged.